Okay, so once again, welcome to the Dpac DLAC workshop, new representative workshop. We are going to go ahead and start. I'm going to show you a PowerPoint. Some of this information will be done through a PowerPoint. Some of it will be done. We'll be working on specific documents that you will have access to in a second, and we'll talk about that. Let's see. Okay, let me just go ahead and, okay. So this is the Dpac DLAC workshop for new elected representatives. Welcome everybody, welcome to your first meeting. This is not necessarily an official meeting, but it is a workshop and we're very excited to have you here. We're very excited to be working with you. Welcome for being elected either to ELAC or through your ELAC or through your school site council or your overall open election. Welcome to being a representative of your site here at Dpac or DLAC. The meeting that we're going to be having today, or the workshop we're going to be having today, is going to go through some of the structural needs that happen during these meetings, as well as some of the procedural things that happen during this meeting. You're more than welcome to ask questions in the chat. We'll go over how to ask questions in the chat, as well as how to raise your hand if you want to be heard during one of these meetings. The procedures that we'll be showing you are pretty much what you're going to see in your general Dpac or DLAC meetings. Some of these meetings are combined, meaning that you will be with other representatives from other committees, meaning if you're DLAC, in some meetings you might be with Dpac, and if you're Dpac, in some meetings you might be with DLAC, and then sometimes you will be separate, where you'll just have your DLAC group or your Dpac group. Like it's going to happen in the meetings in September 15th and the 16th, you will be with your separate committees on those meetings, okay? But once again, welcome. I am Mr. Dominguez. I am one of your support staff here at State and Federal. I work with Ms. Delgado. I work under her, and I'm here to support you. We also have here on the Zoom meeting, we have Ms. Simmons. Ms. Simmons, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here. Many of you may know me, and if you don't know me, I am the district's parent liaison. In our district, we're called community relation facilitators, and I'm here to support you at the district level.
So let's go ahead and get started. The agenda for today, which is not the agenda you would see in a regular meeting. This is an agenda just for our meeting today, so that you kind of see the breakdown of what we're going to be working on today. We're going to be obviously doing the welcome. We're going to be talking today about the pre-meeting process, what happens before a meeting actually starts. We're going to be talking about during the meeting, what happens, once a meeting is actually started. We'll talk about the differences between Dpac and DLAC. We're also going to be talking about the procedures for the meetings on September 16th and September 15th. And the reason for that is because those meetings are a little bit different than our regular meetings, okay? Because those are meetings where we're going to be voting for elective members of the board or nominated members of the board. They're going to be a little bit different. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, we will have a conversation of why we're here. What is the purpose of these committees? Why are we asking you to show up on a monthly basis? Why it's important for you to show up, and what we as a district get from that, as an entire district, not me, but the district, and you being part of that district, and what you get to then, get from us to support your specific sites, right? Because you're really an important piece of the puzzle for what happens at our district, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. I can. Okay. Okay. So let's go ahead and get started with the first piece of the puzzle, pre-meeting process. So what happens before a meeting, right? So usually no more than 72 hours, sometimes, 80 hours before we actually have a meeting. What you do is, or what happens is, you actually get an agenda, right? You get an agenda from Ms. Simmons or myself, right? And then on that agenda, it describes what happens during the meeting? What are going to be the things that are going to be discussed during the meeting? That agenda is really important. We develop it with the reps that are elected from your different committees. So that way we have an idea of what we're going to discuss the next meeting. One of the reasons is because we don't have a lot of time, right? In those meetings, there's a lot of information that's being given to you and a lot of information that we're receiving from you. So we want to make sure we have a structure, right? Also, before the meeting, there is also a PowerPoint that is normally being presented. And the PowerPoint, what it does is it just basically gives you the general information of the meeting. It gives you the general procedures. It tells you, for example, what are some of the etiquette that we have. You come into the meeting with your microphone muted. You make sure that your name on your screen is a name that we can identify, right? Meaning, hopefully you give us your full name. So that way, when we are doing some of the back end support, like tabulating votes or figuring out attendance, that we are easily able to identify you within this large group, okay? Let me show you, because what that actual, what that looks like. If I can actually, here we go. So what it looks like, this meeting, this welcome meeting, it looks something like this, right? It has, you know, usually a picture of who was elected. It goes back and forth. It has information like the welcome, the links to the agenda. If you weren't able to get the link to the agenda before the meeting, it also has the visitor and staff sign in, really important, because those are the ways that we know if you were here at the meeting. And obviously it tells you how to mute yourself and how to access the chat. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this, but this will, you'll just see that it goes on and on before a meeting, before you actually show up. Okay, if there are questions on the chat, you can keep adding questions to the chat. If you're already comfortable with that, start writing questions on the chat. We will definitely have a Q&A at some point to be able to answer some of those questions, okay? Now, once we are right before the meeting, what you will have access to is you will have access to an agenda. Now, the agenda is what you are going to, first of all, you know, right off the start, you're going to be voting either to approve the agenda or to not approve the agenda, right? We don't want you to start voting on the agenda, even though you might have access to this link, you know, early on. We don't want you to start approving that agenda until about 30 minutes before we start any of our meetings. So usually about 8:30 in the morning, right? Somewhere around there. I'm going to show you a copy of what an agenda looks like. This is the same agenda we're going to be discussing today as we get to that portion of the meeting. So let me show you that. So this is what the agenda usually looks like, right? I'm not going to go into it yet, but just to take, for you to take a look at it, if you want to kind of looks like, right? And what's happening is you'll have access once again to this agenda about 72 hours before the meeting, usually longer than that. We will be posting a copy of this agenda through the chat. We will be posting this copy of this agenda. Let me see if I can make it bigger, through the chat. We'll be posting it through our website. We will be sending to you through Infinite Campus. You will be having access through this at the meeting, right before the meeting. When that welcome screen goes around, you'll have access to that. So there are multiple ways for you to have access to the agenda. If for some reason you're not able to get to any of those ways, like Infinite Campus, you're not able to get it through, you know, the chat that we put in, whatever, you know, might be the issue, just let us know, right? And we can always send you a copy as well. That's what Ms. Simmons and I are here for. We're here to support the DLAC and Dpac committees. We're not here to run the meetings, right? We're here to support, and we're support systems for anything that, you know, you might need, right, as a member of Dpac or DLAC. Ms. Simmons, anything you'd like to add?
No, Joran, you said everything that we need to cover at this point.
Okay, thank you. So And they all look like this. Some of them have a lot more information depending on the meeting, but usually we took the time off because since this is it's not really a meeting with specific time frames, we took it off, but we will go over each one of these later on in this workshop, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing this, and I'm gonna go back to this. Now, as we pointed out on the bottom, if you are using a computer on the bottom, right, there is a button that says chat. This is where you can post questions, which many of you are doing, right? But also, this is where you can click on the chat, and when we post anything to the meeting, like the link for the agenda, the link for voting, the link for attendance, anything, that's another way you'll have access to, right, through the chat, right? And you can see that when you click chat, it opens up like a little window on the side that allows you to do that, okay? So how to approve the agenda before the meeting. So you show up, you're here at, let's say 8:45, you're seeing that, welcome message come through. You're like, I'm ready, Mr. Dominguez. I am ready for my first day being a representative. So how do I do what I need to do? So what we're going to do, or what's going to happen, is you'll have a link that we will either put on the chat. Once again, we will send it to you, right? And that link will allow you to get into the first thing you need to do as a rep. Ms. Simmons?
Yes, you could see that I posted the link on the chat. So the same link that it's on our screen, it's I have added to the chat, and so it will take you. Mr. Dominguez, can you help us by going to the link?
Yeah, I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
It kicked me out to something else. So I am going right now. Here we go.
Okay. So as you can see, this is a mock agenda. It tells you, it says the agenda approval for today's meeting. You will select what committee you're representing. If you're unsure, we have records of your representation. So pick whichever you think you belong to and click next. Then you will type your name, your full name. So Mr. Dominguez is typing his name. The next question is, there will be meetings when we have groups. So if that's the case, and if you need interpretation, you would let us know. And you would select your position. If you're a representative or alternate, again, don't be too concerned about that because we have records of that. We just want to know who's here, and it's very important for us to keep record of all the schools that were represented today. So you would select if you're a school member, or if you're a DLAC community rep, or if you're a staff member. And the most important and critical part of this form, if you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, you will see, how do you vote on approving the agendas for today? You have an option to say yes, no, or abstain. Again, this is the approval of the agenda for today. And we follow, we need to know who is in the meeting, and this is how we establish attendance, like your students would do in the classroom, but also this is how it lets us know who voted. And if you're not sure, or if you have an issue, you can click abstain. And then you would click submit.
So remember, this starts about 30 minutes before we start the meeting. You can do it 10 minutes before, 20 minutes before. You don't want to do it more than 30 minutes because that basically you would have to re-vote, right, at that point. If you're, let's say you have a student at East Lake and a student at East Lake High School, right, a middle and high school, and you're like, well, Mr. D or Ms. Simmons, which one do I click? You want to click on the one that you were elected for that particular school. So let's say your student is at East Lake Middle and you had another student at East Lake High School, but you only got voted on at East Lake High School. That's the one you would click because you weren't voted on at East Lake Middle. We're glad that you're here, right? We thank you that you're here, and anybody can show up to these meetings at any time. These are public meetings. We do record them. So if you were not here at the beginning of the meeting, you didn't hear it's being recorded, but we do record these meetings, and everything that we do between the moment that we start recording that meeting And the moment that we stop recording the meeting, it's basically saved and uploaded to our website, right? You won't, we won't see how you voted in this way because we don't have access to this way. Ms. Simmons and I have it a different way. But it is important that you select what school you were elected for. Even though you might have kids in both schools, you probably only got elected in one. Now, if you got elected in both, great, right? Then you can go ahead and choose both of them, as long as it is the right actual group, right? Dpac and Dlac are different, and they have different representatives depending how those elections went. Okay.
And Mr. Dominguez, I'd like
Yes.
to add a point. Also, as Mr. Dominguez mentioned, you could start voting on the agenda 30 minutes before the meeting begins. So if our meeting begins at 9, you can start voting at 8:30. If our meeting begins at 1, you could start voting at 12:30. It's very important that you stop voting. There will be a time in the agenda when the president or vice president will go over this and check how many votes we have, and they will check. It usually is a first couple of points, like up to point 3, and they will say, do we have quorum? And our office will confirm, yes, we have quorum. And it's important that you don't vote at the end of the meeting or even the afternoon, like at 3 or 4 o'clock, or the 11 o'clock that night, because then your voting will be canceled. And something else that is very important, if you meant to vote but something came up and you didn't come to the meeting, we will verify if you came into the meeting, and if for some reason you just could not come in the meeting, your vote will be invalidated.
So if you showed up to the meeting, but you didn't vote and then you voted later, right, it's going to be invalidated. So it's really important that you show up, as we said, about, 15, maybe 20 minutes before the meeting, that you have access to that agenda beforehand. So you have it in front of you, that you know what you're voting on as well, right? Because there's information in there that's really important. And then once you vote, we will tally that. There will be a point, as Ms. Simmons said, that the voting will stop. And then that's when we have to either figure out if we, based on our bylaws, DLAC or Dpac, if we can continue with that agenda. If we don't have enough people voting for whatever reason, then we would have to postpone that vote until the next meeting, which means that meeting, you would have to have 2 votes. So we don't want to do that either, right? So we want to make sure that we're here and that we're ready to make a decision on what's on that agenda, right?
And one more point before we move on. I know that we are in a virtual environment and you may not be able to see if your rep or how many reps from your school are present. We're asking that you vote, because as you're voting, we're populating our votes and we can see how many parents are here. So we ask that everybody votes, and we're only going to count the votes according to each committee's bylaws.
Yes, Ms. Simmons is really good at knowing your names more than I am. She is amazing at that. So even if you're not like, wait, did so-and-so show up? Because, they're the ones that can vote, just vote. And what happens is we'll figure that on the back end and we'll tabulate and make sure that everything is correct based on your bylaws, okay? Depending on your group, Dpac or Dlac. Okay, so now we're done with the pre-meeting, right? Now the actual meeting is going to start. So the president will basically start the meeting, right? The meeting will start being recorded when the president says that the meeting is ready to continue. And then at that point, there's going to be a couple of things that are going to happen that you need to be aware of, because based on what happens or these rules, right, is how we ask you to bring up ideas or how to agree on ideas. So these are called Robert's rules, right? Now, Robert's rules are many, right? Today we're not going to focus on a lot of them. As we go along during the year, we will definitely talk a little bit more about all the different rules. But for now, we want to focus on the ones that you need to know right off the bat, right? Because once again, the next meeting that you will be in September 15th or 16th, right? It's going to be interesting. They're not going to be your regular meetings that you normally would see, because we are actually having elections, those meetings. So it's really important that you show up if you were voted on to these committees. So Robert rules, making things a little bit, keeping things efficient, right? So the main thing, and we're going to practice that today a little bit, right? Because you are going to have access to the agenda, and we've already posted it on, actually, have we posted the agenda on the chat? No, we have not, right?
No.
Let me go back and find that. Hold on. Ms. Simmons, do you know if you can post that on the chat, the actual agenda?
Yes, I will download it right now.
Okay, so what's going to happen is, right, you vote on the agenda. We realize through our internal voting systems that we have quorum, meaning we have enough schools showing up and enough of those reps that are able to vote showing up that we can actually move on with either making a motion to approve the agenda or making a motion to approve the agenda with some amendments, right? So what happens is usually the president will say, here's the agenda, and we'll give you a copy of that in a second. Here's the agenda. And, one of you, depending on where you're at, Dpac or Dlac, one of you will say, my name is, in this case, let me assume I'm at Sweetwater High School. And I go, my name is Jacob Dominguez from Sweetwater High School. And I move to approve the agenda for September 7th, right? So I'm saying I vote on the agenda. We have quorum. The president's asking, does anybody want to motion to approve the agenda? And I, as one of the reps, because my son or daughter are at Sweetwater, I say aye, and then I state my name and the school and my name. Now, it's really important that you state your name and the name of your school. And the reason for that is because that lets us know who's doing it, right? And it can be recorded in our minutes who actually motioned to approve the agenda, right? Now, once I do that, then let's say Ms. Simmons is a parent of another student, right? And she heard that I motioned to approve the agenda, meaning I'm like, I'm okay with that agenda. Let's go ahead and approve it, right? Then Ms. Simmons would come in and say,
I, Anna Simmons, X, Y, and Z school, second the motion to approve the September 7th meeting agenda.
right? And that is the second person that basically saying, I also agree to, move the agenda and to approve the agenda as is written. Now, there might be times when you're trying to approve an agenda and there might be something, that could have been typed in or it could have been misspelled, right? And somebody catches it. And that's really important, right? Because we want our agendas to be as clear as possible. So maybe in that case, I come in and let's say I'm at another school and I go, I, Israel Dominguez, move to approve the agenda from September 7th, but with the amendments that were discussed. Now we're assuming that there was a conversation regarding the changes that needed to be done on the agenda before we approved it, right? But it's really important that we keep these rules in place because if not, our meetings can become a little bit less efficient. And one of the reasons we're here is not just to be efficient, but to also make sure that we use our time wisely for the improvement of our students and their outcomes to the district. Okay.
I would like to make an additional comment. Because we're in a virtual setting, there will be after this process of seconding a motion. So in the specific case of approving the agenda, you will already have voted as a majority on approving the agenda. And at that time, the vice president or the president will read on the chat that the majority of schools have voted. So if we were in person, you would all vote physically with the voting paddle. And so that would be the third step. But because we're voting virtually 30 minutes before the meeting starts, the third step is that one of the officers in the committee will confirm that the majority has voted, even if there's one person abstaining. So that would be the third step. And again, the vote is through the electronic link.
That's great. I forgot about that. Thank you, Ms. Simmons.
No problem.
Okay. So now, the president, we have voted on the agenda, but there are actions or things that are happening in the meeting that you would like to, have make a comment on or add to the conversation. And Ms. Simmons would go ahead and explain this to you.
So just as some of you may have already been here at the beginning, you saw that one of the parents raised her hand. There's at the bottom of your Zoom controls, there is reactions, or as we know them, emojis. So you would raise your hand by clicking on the emoji, and then there's an option that allows you to raise your hand. So what that does, as you can see on the screen below the emojis, on our end or on or even from all of you, you can see participants, and you could see that John Geisler has a blue red hand on next to her name, next to the microphone, to the muted microphone. So that would let the people running the meeting, in this case would be the parliamentarian, the president from Dpac or Dlac, know that you would like to make a comment. Now, during the agenda, there's a time for Q&A. So after a presenter is ready to receive comments, the parliamentarian or officer will scan the participant list for people that have their raised hand, and that's the parliamentarian's role, to monitor who raised their hand first. We also encourage you to type questions on the chat, and so the officers will monitor the raise hand or the chat, and you may speak after being recognized and not until you're recognized, and that's part of Robert Rules of Order.
So it's really important though that if you type something on the chat, for example, and you are wondering like, you know what, the meeting is about to end and they haven't really answered my question, right? Sometimes some of the questions may not be answered due to time constraints live as we go through the meeting, but don't worry about it. That's why Ms. Simmons, myself, and Ms. Delgado are here. We are here to support and to make sure that those questions are answered, right? So even if we may not get to one of your questions right on the spot, right, we will reach out to you. That's why your names are really important, right? Understanding what school you're from, and that your name is something that we can easily identify so that we can get back to you and hopefully answer that question within the next 24 hours. So that way you're not waiting for an answer, or you don't feel like, you know, we weren't going to answer that question. You know, as you know, these meetings could have a lot of information that is being shared to you. So sometimes those questions on the chat, even though they may not get answered right away, they do get answered. And it's really important for your questions to be on there because we actually keep a record of that, and we can go back and identify like, oh, this person asked us, let's email them, right? Or let's call them and make sure we answer that question. Okay. Okay. Let's go ahead and continue. But before we continue, because we're about to get into actually during the meeting agenda protocols, right? We have a hand up from Ms. Estrada. Ms. Estrada, if you can unmute yourself. How you doing?
Thank you so much. Sorry, can you please put again the instruction how the parents can use the translation, because one mom was having trouble and now she's in the meeting, but she needs to understand how she can use the translation, please.
All right, let's see if we can go back. Do we have a screenshot with that? I'm trying to go back if we have one. We have one in another meeting, but
Can I
yeah.
say it in Spanish, Mr.
Yeah,
Dominguez?
go for it.
Para la persona que necesita interpretación, en la parte, si usted está en la junta, en la parte inferior de la pantalla, hay hacia el final, en la parte inferior, casi al final, antes de llegar a la carita feliz, debe de haber un mundo que dice interpretación. Si usted le hace clic a ese mundo, al hacer clic va a elegir español. Y tiene que hacerle clic al mundito para escuchar al intérprete y también elegir silenciar o mute audio original para que no oiga al presentador y al intérprete. So I just give instructions on interpretation. If you need to hear what is being said in your language, you click interpretation, select the language you want to hear the translation to, and mute original audio. And it's at the bottom of your screen under interpretation.
It should be like a little globe that allows you to click on that. Okay. And if anybody needs, we actually created a Zoom training on that already. I know that we're in the meeting right now, but if anybody who may not be in the meeting knows or needs to know how to do that, let us know, and we will more than happy to send you a link to that training, which is also actually up on our website. Okay. So now during meeting protocols, right? So we're done with the pre-meeting stuff. That was all pre-meeting, right? Now we're going to get into the actual meeting, right? So in the meeting, right? This is where we get into the make sure that everybody shows up and make sure that everybody votes, right? The reason why we want to make sure everybody shows up is because if not everybody shows up, then things get a little bit complicated, not for you, but for us to make sure that we get the right people voting at the right time. So for Dpac, right? Dpac has basically a representative or an alternate if the representative is not showing up to the meeting or couldn't show up to the meeting, right? Now, in some schools, you might actually have 2 representatives who were voted on as representatives and 1 alternate, right? But basically the way it works is that whoever was voted representative gets to vote, and the alternates only get to vote if the alternates, if the representative is not there. Now, if you're one of those schools that has 2 representatives, then you get to vote twice, right? But basically that's the way it works. Now, as it says right there, schools may have up to 2 votes based on representation, right? So it's really important that you vote, because we then will be able to figure that on the back end, right? It's just important that you vote when you come in, if you're basically voting on the agenda or an action item. Now, DLAC, it's a little bit more straightforward. The representative, whoever was selected as a representative, gets to vote. If that representative is not present, then it goes to the alternate, and then that person actually gets to vote. Now, DLAC sometimes has 2 alternates. So the first alternate will get first to vote. If that person or the representative is not here, then the second alternate will then be able to vote, right? DLAC only has 1 vote per school, right? And what we go off of the information that is sent out by your sites, okay? And that's how we actually determine who gets to vote first. And if that person is not here, then he gets to vote second or third, depending on the group, okay? There are bylaws that we have down here. We also have them on our website that you can click on, so you can actually read how some of these voting arrangements were discussed or came about, okay? Ms. Simmons, anything to add on this one?
Yes, so the bylaws are a set of rules on how you as a committee decide to run your meetings. These bylaws can be amended to make your meetings more efficient or to follow with the times, such as we're doing right now. We're meeting virtually. Both committees, DLAC and Dpac, amended their bylaws with your approval, so we can have these virtual meetings, and so that we could have virtual voting and just expedite the meetings. As you can see on the screen, that picture without the names and school names and positions, that's what we see when you're voting. As you're voting, we get a live list of people that are voting. It marks, we're not touching anything, we're just refreshing the vote, and it shows me who's voting. So we highly recommend everyone in the meeting to vote, because you don't know how many people are from your school present. You might know your reps or you might not know your reps. So we ask that you all vote, and we will determine based on these results how many votes we can count, whether you have 1 or 2 reps, or you have, however the configuration allows you, we will determine that. So I just wanted to show you what the back end means or what it looks like.
Okay, so now we are ready to go ahead and practice, right? So right now, there is a sample agenda that Ms. Simmons went ahead and added to the chat. What I would recommend is you click on that document that is in the chat if you have access to it. If not, I will go over it on the screen as well. But what you would do is you would click on that document, and that would open up the agenda. Now, we're not going to ask you to vote directly right now, but we are going to go over the agenda just because of time constraints and because we do want to leave some time for questions and answers. But we will go over what an agenda looks like, the different steps of the agenda, so that when you're in those meetings, you're not caught off guard of, you know, why are we doing this or why is this happening this way? Okay, so let me share that with you. So I'm going to share the agenda one more time. Okay. All right. So this agenda, as we said, you will get this at least 72 hours before, so you have access to it and make sure you understand what's going to be talked about during that meeting. It is important that, you know, as we said before, and I think we repeated this many times, that you show up to these meetings as one of the reps, because there's a lot of information that we get from you and a lot of information that we give to you, right? And we will talk about the information that we give to you, why that's important. Ms. Delgado, who is here right now in the meeting with us, will talk a little bit more about that. But basically on the top of the agenda, we'll have the date of this meeting, who are going to be your elective president, vice president, secretary, and parliamentarian. And then it will have the times, right? Then it will have a lot of the pre-meeting information, which is the link to the Zoom, the meeting ID if you want to do that. It will ask you to make sure that you enter your full name when signing into Zoom, because as we said before, this is how we figure out who is here in the meetings, right? It also asks you to mute your phone or your computer microphone, so that way when we're in the meeting, we can hear each other or we can hear the presenter, right? There are links up here that you will use to sign in and vote for the agenda and also, or approve the agenda, sorry, and also to sign in as attendance, right? And then there's the agenda itself. As we mentioned before, all meetings are recorded. You will have people in here who are not reps because these are public meetings, right? So you might see people you don't recognize or people that work at the district that might be presenting, right? So it's really important that you understand that these are open to the general public. Anybody can come in to any of our meetings. So it's really important that what we say is focus on what we're talking about in the agenda, right? So the first thing you're going to see after we actually start the meeting, let's say this is a 9 o'clock meeting. So the first thing you'll see is that the president will call to order the meeting. We will begin recording the meeting and we will do the Pledge of Allegiance and a welcome from the president, right? Then the parliamentarian will talk about the meeting ground rules and the protocol, which we've gone a little bit over today. And then they will ask you to please provide us with any announcements that you would like to make by 10 a.m. if this is, I believe, like a 9:30 meeting, right? Or something like that. Or a 9 o'clock meeting, sorry. They will ask you to make any announcements. These could be general announcements about the district, something's happening at the district, maybe a parent meeting at the district, or maybe a workshop at the district. These could be community related announcements, anything that really promotes and provides, you know, more opportunities or more resources for our students and our parents to learn and grow, right? And then, so we'll ask you about 10 o'clock because there's another portion at the end of this where we will actually mention the announcements, okay? And then we'll go into the agenda approval. Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
On the agenda approval, why do we say 14 schools?
So the 14 school is the minimum attendance that we need to make a meeting official. That is established by dividing 26 by 2 plus 1. And that is the quorum that was decided by Dpac and Dlac in previous years. So that's the official quorum. So 26 divided by 2 is 13 plus 1 is 14. And so that's the minimum attendance that is required to have an official meeting and for the agenda to be approved and to vote on action items.
So it's really important, once again, that you show up, right? Because if we don't get that quorum, then the agenda cannot be approved. So then we would have to push it back to another date. And that's not something that we want to do because our time in general, in your time, is really valuable. So we don't want to keep pushing back things that we can be discussing, right? Then for this particular meeting, so this is really important, for the meeting on September 15th and the meeting on September 16th, what's going to happen is we are going to go over the different roles. So we're going to discuss the different roles of the Dpac officers and also the DELAC officers. So in Dpac, they'll go over the president, the role of vice president, the parliamentarian, and the secretary. And the reason for that is because nominations are still being accepted. If you were elected to Dpac, right, you can still either self-nominate or nominate somebody else to one of these positions, right? What's going to happen on the 15th at some point, the president will go ahead and close nominations during the meeting. After they discuss the roles, they will close nominations, and then we will have an election. In that election, the people that are able to, or the voting members will be separated from, let's say, the general public, and the voting members will then vote for each one of the nominated people for each one of the positions, right? So it's really important that you show up on time that day because there's going to be a lot of moving parts, and you want to make sure you know how your vote is going to be cast and make sure that your vote actually does count, right? So that's going to be for Dpac, right, on the 15th, right? And then on the 16th, same thing's going to happen. If you're in DLAC, right, same thing. There will be a section where nominations are still being accepted. Once nominations are closed, we will talk about the different roles of the, president, vice president, parliamentarian, secretary, and attendance secretary. Then we will hold elections, and then we will tabulate the results, and then we will do an oath of office for those reps. Ms. Simmons, anything to add on this one?
Yes, there's 2 points. One is that after you've accepted a nomination from another parent or peer, or once you nominated yourself, you will have an opportunity to give a brief introduction on who you are, what school you represent, your experience, and why should other parents elect you to hold that office that you're running for. That typically you can have usually about a minute to give an introduction so parents can get to know you. You can, we recommend that you write your summary before the meeting and that you're able to be flexible, because if we have several parents running, we might ask you the officers might ask you to shorten your introduction as brief as possible. If you are running for multiple positions, you will only be able to speak once. We might show your screen again when parents are voting for you, but you will only be able to speak once. For DLAC, as Mr. Dominguez mentioned, there's one more position in the board. Once the boards are elected and they will be sworn in by our director, DLAC has one position that is open to community members, and the requirement for DLAC, for the community representative position, is that they live in the South Bay, that they're citizens that are committed to improving English learner academic achievement, and that they don't have students in the Sweetwater district. And the purpose of that is that DLAC is inviting community members to give input to the DLAC from a different perspective, and that would be just from the community perspective.
So yeah, so if you are in DLAC and you know members of the community who you think would be able to bring a lot of energy and a lot of information on how the community wants to improve the outcomes for our English language learners, this is a great position for them as well, right? And they can be elected during the September 16th meeting, right? Now, what happens after we do the elections and everything is done? Okay. Now, if it was a regular meeting, normally we wouldn't have this part number 4, number 5, right? Because that would be filled in maybe with a presentation or actionable items that you need to act on as a member of the committee. Actually, 4, 5, and 6. But in a regular meeting, 7 would happen. If you can see the number 7 would happen, which is old and new business. Now, old and new business is basically any information, the old businesses, any information that maybe was brought up on a previous meeting and we needed to have more time to research it or figure it out. And I say we, I mean the committee as a whole, with our support, obviously, because we're here to support you. That would be the old business, right? New businesses, anything that maybe a question that has been brought up or information that needs to be researched that we would like to get, or that you would like to get more information on, that we may not be able to answer right on the spot. So we bring it, to the next meeting, right? And we talk about it during the next meeting after we're able to investigate as a group the answer to whatever question was brought up. Okay. Then after that, we have announcements, right? Ms. Simmons, can you talk a little bit about what announcements are?
Yes, an announcement is any event or happening that is taking place at your school or at the community, or if you want to share a program or resource that it is of interest to the community at large, or that your school community is organizing that would benefit all the schools. Something like it could be an athletic event or an educational or anything related with health, and that it's free to the community and that it would benefit everyone.
Okay. And then we have public communication, which is just a public comment or public forum, right? Where people from the community can, ask questions or post, needs that they might see. Now, remember, we are really focused here on our students. We're focused on what, Dpac and DLAC do. If it's something where maybe it's a one-on-one conversation that needs to be had because it's something that's happening at a specific site with a specific member of our community, then this is a time to then reach out to us individually, right? Not in the open forum, because in the open forum, we really want to stay focused on the job that Dpac and DLAC do. We really want to make sure that we're working toward that because, as I said, there's a lot of information that you're going to receive from us and a lot of information we need from you. So our time is very valuable. Not that the questions about specific individuals or specific sites is not valuable, but those can be definitely be conversations that we have in a separate conversation on a one-on-one basis, either with myself or Ms. Delgado or Ms. Simmons, depending on the situation that might be happening, right? The old forum, once again, it is an open forum, but it's really an open forum for what we do at Dpac and what we do at DLAC, okay? Okay, and then finally after that, we end up with meeting evaluations. You will get another link that will be sent to you on the chat where you evaluate the meeting. That's really important for us because we always want feedback as a district, as members of your support team. We want to know how we can improve, how we can make it better, how we can make sure that we are doing right by you and that we're doing right by our students, right? And then after that, the president will go ahead and adjourn the meeting. When the president adjourns the meeting, that's when we stop recording. Once we stop recording, then anything that is said after that is not something that will be uploaded to the internet or to our website because we've already stopped the recording, right? So if you ever go and say, well, but I talked about this in a meeting and it happened after we stop recording, then even though the conversation is saved between us as human beings, right? It's not actually set up to be saved on the web, okay? And then that's it. And then we'll give you more information for the next meeting on the agenda. Okay. Now, the next part, okay, the next part is the purpose of us as reps. And this is where Ms. Delgado would like to mention a couple of things regarding on why we're here, right? Because it seems like our agenda is very, has a lot of different things that we need to follow. But there's a purpose why we're here, right? It's a bigger purpose than just the agenda, right? So Ms. Delgado?
Thank you, Mr. Dominguez. I really appreciate your very thorough overview of how our meetings are run, especially the agenda, because that's what leads it. But why are you here? You were elected to represent your school, and now you are going to come once a month to DLAC and Dpac. What for? Oh yes, I'm going to advocate for my school and I'm going to get more money for my school. No. That is not what you're gonna do, okay? So, but it's close to that, but there's a protocol, there's a way of going about it. So I want you to come into our meetings knowing that the agenda has been set by your officers. So whoever you elect as a president, vice president, and cabinet or officers, they set the agenda for you every month. So let's say you have an idea for an agenda item, you want a presentation, talk to your officers. That's who you go through. If there's something that is a topic of conversation at your school and you think it's important, talk to your officers because they can put it on the agenda and let us know that this is important to the whole district as parents. So there's ways of getting out there and talking about things that are important to your school that we can put on the agenda as topics of discussion or a presentation from someone from the school district. So pretty much you come in and you're representing school site council, you're representing your ELAC, and you come into those perspective groups. So when we have the Dpac meeting, all the school site council reps will come to that meeting. And when we have DLAC, all the ELAC reps will come into that meeting. But sometimes we have joint meetings. And what that means is that both groups will come in and we will have a common ground of discussion and or feedback sessions. So most of the time when we have joint meetings, we need your voice. That's when we need as a district for you to give us your suggestions, perceptions, and feedback when it comes to our LCAP. LCAP is it's the plan that dictates where the money goes and how we use the money in our schools. So, and in our district. So these sessions are very critical that I don't want you to miss. And sometimes we have to do them separately in Dpac and DLAC. We do separate feedback sessions. So that's important that you're not absent to any of the meetings. It's only once a month. And these are very, very important times. So when we ask for your feedback as a DLAC representative or an ELAC from your school, that means we want to know how the school is doing with their English learners. How's your program doing? Are they acquiring English quickly? Are they having struggles? How can the district assist and support with that, especially when it comes to funding? When we meet with Dpac or the Dpac feedback of Title I, that means all the items that you speak about that you're funding out of your SIPSA, remember the school site plan for student achievement. So everything you talk about in your school site council, is that working? Are your students achieving? Are those strategies that the school site council has come up with effective? So this is where you give us that feedback. You know what, this works, but that doesn't. I think we should invest more in this type of strategy. That is your voice. You bring the voice of your entire school as parents. So that it's very important that you don't miss any school site council meetings as well, along with ELAC meetings, because then you won't know. You won't know what the other parents are saying and or suggesting. So your presence is very critical for the district to make sure we align our planning so it aligns with the needs of the community and the needs of our students. And then, sharing. So once you're here, you give us feedback, you participate in our meetings, you listen to all the presentations that we were going to partake, and hopefully you will learn some things in the process. That's what you go back to your school site council or your ELAC group and you share. We want you to share everything you hear. These are not secrets that we are going to be partaking and sharing with you. This is information that we want you to share with everyone. Everything we tell you, everything that we talk to you about funding and your budgets and the district budget, that's all public information. So you can share it with your parent groups, with your community, when you go to church or wherever you see your parent colleagues, talk to them about it. Hey, did you know that the district is investing a lot in social workers and or mental health? Did you know that? So you're the one who communicates that. If you're a very shy person and you don't like to talk to people, well, we're going to push you to talk to people, because this is a very talking type of position. You have to go out there and talk to people. So everything we give you here will be digital, and Mr. Dominguez is going to help us with that. Everything you will be able to access on our website, so you don't have to lose any papers or anything like that. You can even put links to your friends and your Facebook page, or if you have a little private Facebook and you share stuff with certain parents there, go ahead and put that on there. It's all good. So you want to go back and give a report to your school site council and your ELAC. Along with, maybe you have a time where you sit down with your administrators and your leadership team and you, hey, I heard this in DLAC the other day, or I heard that you're looking into this type of strategy for next year. What do you think about that? Are we going to do that as a school? So it gives you information so you can formulate the right questions. Because if you don't ask the right questions, you're never going to get to that dialogue that people need to have to get to the right answers. So that's why we give you the information. And your job is to keep the community informed, keep the parents informed, keep your school informed, and also to take notes, to ask questions. If you don't understand something, Anna, Jacob, and myself are here for additional meetings. If you want to meet with us after and say, you know what, I think I need more help on understanding this before I can talk about it. with School Site Council. We're here to do that as well. We're a resource for you. You're not alone. It'll be a little overwhelming if you've never talked about budgets and how school systems work, but don't be afraid of it. It's all okay. Everybody felt like that in the beginning, but eventually, I promise you, after a good 2 or 3 meetings in, you'll feel a little bit better about understanding. And if not, it's okay. You can come in and talk to us and we will walk you through it, because everybody learns differently and we're very aware of that. So what else? Did I miss anything, Jacobo?
Just that if you ever are, if you ever want to present to School Site Council or your ELAC, what we presented here, and you want us to support you on that, to, train you, or if you want to, show us what you're going to present so that we, can give you feedback. That's what we're here for too, right? We want to make sure the information that we are giving you is information that, you're sharing with the rest of the school, because it's really, 3 of us in this team, but there's so many of you that support us as well, because this is a two-way street, right? We support you, but you also support us as parents, right? And you have such a large voice at our district that we appreciate, and we appreciate all your input. So if you ever need any support, we're here for you.
Mr. Dominguez, can I make a quick addition?
Yeah.
When you are meeting as separate committees as Dpac or Dlac, you will also have the opportunity to give a brief report, oral report on School Site Council or ELAC. So that's only when you're meeting separately, and we can talk to you more about it individually or in those meetings.
Okay, so basically this is the end. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. This is something that we will add to our website. So for those of you on the chat who are asking about this, I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Let's see, where's my record?